couch. Are you okay?
Yeah, so fucking clumsy lately.
Mm-hmm.
This is boiling. Is that okay like that while you're on your call?
Just simmering. There we go. Right on. Hey, Blake.
Hey, Dan.
Some guys trickling in. Hey, Kurt. Look at you, podcast boy. Right on. Hey, Greg.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good news.
I'm good, brother. I just remembered, Kurt. I saw a message come in from him and I forgot to respond to you. Sorry, it got buried. I had kiddos all over me today.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Kurt?
You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Does it sound awesome? Because I got a new mic.
Just really, really quiet.
Right. Yeah.
Shit.
Maybe.
I don't know how to turn it up.
Well, I guess you'll have to just turn you up.
Yeah. Just use more air.
Sounds good.
It's clear enough.
Blake,
Okay.
how are you?
Good.
Yeah, good. Good
Good.
to see you, buddy. Yeah.
Right on. There were a couple more guys that were going to join that I'll just see if they pop in here. And if not, we'll just get started. Maybe they'll join a bit late.
Sure.
Hopefully. But while we're on the call, you guys, one thing I just wanted to disclose and make sure that we had a little conversation about it if it was required, is that we record these meetings, and elements of the meetings or entire recasts might exist on Rumble or YouTube at some point in the future. And the reason why we're recording is the feedback I've been getting is when men are getting together and like really sharing authentic experience and stepping into that space, it's really helping other men kind of break down some of those barriers, things that probably we had anxiety around before we jumped into these things. So I just wanted to be clear that we're doing that, and we're doing that for the purposes of making other men more comfortable and perhaps seeing kind of what goes on. And maybe that kind of breaks down some barriers to having them join or otherwise, step on this path that we're all kind of interested in walking and continuing to learn about and continuing to grow and really living that authentic human experience and service to the world, as Greg often says. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know, hey, Justin, thanks for joining, brother.
Yeah, no worries, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was just explaining that we record these, and so elements of these meetings can show up from time to time on social media, and I was just kind of explaining the purpose behind that, and just thought I'd give a quick moment if anybody had any questions or otherwise, let me know. We didn't record the last meeting that we had on the chakras, but this one we are recording.
Okay, sounds good.
And at least if there's maybe some discernment you might have as to what you choose to share or otherwise when we do have discussion. So just thought I'd let you know. Right on, boys. So let's just jump into it. I'll just share my screen. Get through this content. Right on. So we did a journey through the chakras. We covered the mortal chakras of the earth, that root chakra, that sacrum, and that solar plexus. And we skipped last week. There was just a couple of us on the call, so we had a discussion, and I thought I'd continue this journey tonight. So it worked out quite well. And you guys didn't miss anything if you weren't here last Sunday. It was just Kurt and Paul and I. So we're going to continue through the heart and onto, the mortal chakras or the chakras of the heavens, being the throat and the third eye and the crown, the Sahasrara. But I'm just continuing this as a full, slide deck with everything in it. And we're just going to take over this heart chakra space where we left last time. And what we're really focusing on, I'll give some general information around the chakras and stuff, but I think what's particularly interesting for us as we, look to grow and understand ourselves better and maybe identify some areas that may be a little bit out of balance, really helps to understand kind of some of the attitudes and behaviors and things that can exist with balance and imbalance in some of these chakras, and whether you believe in these, centers of the body along that spinal column that do actually exist with nerve ganglia and other things going on. But whether you believe that or not, it doesn't really matter about the biology or otherwise. It's really understanding those behaviors, maybe resonating with some of these things. So heart chakra, anahata, is the Sanskrit. The color is a vibrant green. I always imagine a deep emerald green, something very enigmatic, something very wise and deep and mysterious. I thought that was the color that I always envision. The eye space of the heart chakra is I love. So you might remember with the root chakra, it's I am. With the sacrum, it's I feel. With the solar plexus, I do. And when we come into this heart space, it's about loving. And the element is air. We went through earth and water and fire. Now we're at the heart element of air. And the bija sound is yum. And obviously the basic issue that we grapple with at the heart chakra space is love. And I think a lot of this is related to whether we're coming into love from a place of balance and power in those lower three chakras. And so we're not coming into that heart space out of need. And I think when we do have imbalances or other things that we're lacking, where we feel incomplete or otherwise, and we're still seeking for that outside of us, coming into that heart space from a place of need will sadly have its consequences. And so what does the heart chakra teaches us? I just mentioned strength versus need and explain that, so I don't need to do that again. But that love can be unconditional, right? That we live and exist from that space without actually wanting or having a condition that we expect something in return. It feels good to be of service from that beautiful place of power, in that heart space. And that's really what I believe most of us are seeking for that purpose in our lives. It's about acceptance and forgiveness and generosity and gratefulness, obviously all things that really resonate with what a balanced kind of heart chakra would look like. It's really about falling in love with the world, right? Like really driving that beautiful power from that place of stability, that place of, as Greg often says, unfuck with ability, and just true honesty and integrity. And it's just a really great place to exist in. And I'm sure we're always seeking that. Sometimes we may get glimmers. Sometimes we may, be able to stay there for a little bit of time, but it's always something that requires a lot of awareness, a lot of work. And of course, the demon of that heart chakra is grief. So we see a lot of people that are, stuck in grief, may have obviously some difficult circumstances that they've endured. and they can exist in that grief space for a really long time. And, that is their journey. That is their way of healing, perhaps. But what we need to understand, of course, is that when we live in that space of grief, we're really closing down that heart chakra. We're really delaying our ability to kind of take that power, take that strength into that space and live, from that open, accepting space. And grief in many ways is an unwillingness to accept the circumstances that exist or that have developed, unfortunately. So let's move on. And so we look at deficiencies, we'll look at excess, and then it ought to be pretty obvious where we would draw kind of that balance. But when we have a deficiency in that heart space, that heart chakra, antisocial behaviors being withdrawn, overly critical or judgmental of others or to oneself, of course, that loneliness, that isolation, that depression, or that fear of intimacy in relationships, because we're really feeling that lack of wholeness, that lack of confidence or otherwise that might exist from that space. When we get into an excess, we get into codependency, which of course is never healthy. Poor boundaries, which often is connected to codependency, being demanding, clinging, jealous, overly sacrificing. I can identify many, situations where some of these elements might exist in my life from one side to the other. And that's just something to keep in mind. And if we go to balance, we're compassionate, we're loving, we're empathetic, we're self-loving as well. We have that altruism, that outside of us willingness to bring good and power to the world, that peacefulness, that balance, all of those things that make sense in between those two extremes. I skipped that. I guess you can go back. So bear with me. Just zoom through this slide. And then we look at healing practices. I like to mention affirmations, things that you might want to bring into your intention or your, brain, repeating to yourself a few times. Words are spells and certainly can have an impact on some of these elements. So just some ideas for some of those affirmations. I am worthy, loving. My love is boundless or permeates all things, and both to myself and others I'm loving. So just some simple ideas, or you could make up your own, of course, if you like affirmations. That healing practice of pranayama, we come back to breath work all the time, but this heart space is on the front of our bodies where we our energy meets that energy of the world. And if that is a, closed off area that's out of balance, that we need to obviously open up and rebalance, that pranayama, deep breathing into those spaces can be really helpful to open up some of, these channels. And that cardiac plexus where the heart is, runs outside to the shoulders, all the way down the arms to the hands. And so work with the arms when we do some of these healing practices, whether it's yoga with long hand lines or other types of things, can really start to create that space. You think of a big kind of open goddess pose or bent arm kind of chest pull back, and you get that real big opening. And some of these things you could do with the arms to really activate that heart center space. Cactus arms is the word I was looking for. I'm sure Justin would have said it if he knew what I was doing. But journaling, self-discovery, of course, these are just ways to connect with internally where you are, where that power is, and bringing that out in a way of, purpose and beautiful love and healing. And psychotherapy, which is pretty much relevant for everything. Sometimes we need to use some of these practices that may work for us. They may not work for others, but in any event, taking advantage of these different modalities to kind of go and reprogram, rewrite that story, that subconscious, some of these things that are driving our behaviors that we're not even aware of. And so it's important to kind of look into some of these other ways in which we can kind of create some opportunity to heal some of these things that are causing the patterns that exist in our lives. So I went through that fairly quickly, but we'll just keep going. Then we get to the chakras, the heavens, like that throat chakra, that third eye chakra, and the chakra at the top of the head, Vishuddha, Ajna, and Sahasrara. We'll start with that throat chakra. And the throat chakra is all about sound, right? It's a beautiful color blue like the sky. The I statement is I speak. But sound is also about, listening, being a good listener. It's not just speaking. That element is ether, sound. We get into these higher chakras where they don't have elements that we would typically associate, just things like sound, and you'll get into intuition and some other elements later on. That bija sound is ham. And the basic issue, obviously, with the sound, the hearing, the listening, the speaking is communication. And so a lot of people that I have worked with in the past while have throat chakra imbalances, and I do many times as well. And it's really where we're fully able to express our individuality, our truth. There's a beautiful cycle that exists between the second chakra, that sacrum that we covered last time, where, through our five senses, we're taking in the world. We're experiencing the world through our five senses and bringing that into our bodies, that element of water, creativity, desire. That's where we take that in. And if we have a clear path throughout the throat chakra, that's where we express our inner world to the world outside. And there's this beautiful cycle when you look at the Chinese medicine and some of these other modalities that talk about that beautiful in and out cycle. And what happens, however, is that we feel, we desire, we have these experiences, and then we bottleneck some of those things. And and it's interesting that the neck is kind of the smallest part in our bodies between that sacrum and that voice. And we often, censor things or reframe things the way that we think others may want to hear them. And really that cycle gets broken, where we can sit in the place of that beautiful power, that beautiful authenticity, that beautiful confidence, and anything that is happening in here, we have the way, to communicate it, to express it. That's really what we're looking for. And so I'm sure we can all resonate with many situations where we bottleneck that natural cycle out of, fear, out of wanting to be accepted, or whatever it might be. And so, we really need to focus on that communication. And the demon is lies, and that makes sense. Not lies in the sense that you're saying you did something that you didn't, although that would be obviously a lie. But when you're not truly expressing what's happening inside with your communication, you're bottlenecking it, you're censoring it, you're changing it. You're basically lying to yourself, and that's where that demon is really important to understand. And so, and this is where I talked about taking that outer world in through the sacrum and bringing that inner world out through the throat chakra, through sound, to the outer world. And so that beautiful cycle, ideally, is as unblocked as possible. So let's talk about some of the deficiency issues, which should be obvious with what I've just described. But yeah, that fear of speaking, that small, weak voice, an unwillingness to articulate or to communicate our inner world out there, that introversion, that shyness, and actually poor rhythm and tone deaf is an interesting one. But it does make sense because we're either open to sound or we're, shying away from it. Excess, too much talking, inability to listen, gossiping, things that are obvious there with that excess. I hit back again, so I apologize. I'll just sketch through. And it pretty makes sense too when you look at these, ends of the spectrum or different ends of the continuum. What would exist in the middle, right? Is a beautifully balanced throat chakra, maybe a resonant voice, or someone who's a really good listener, good sense of timing, rhythm, and maybe clear communication. Lives creatively, these kinds of things where you've got that real natural cycle in a healthy output after you've taken in all of those inputs of the universe around you. So I deserve to be heard. I speak clearly and true. I speak my truth. My voice matters. Pretty obvious affirmations. And then when we talk about healing practices, especially in yoga, with throat chakra imbalances, focus initially on that neck and those shoulders. A lot of muscles going on there. Loosening that area up can create a lot of space physically in that area. You'd be surprised how often when we have imbalances in these areas, you'll see a lot of tension and other issues happening in the body. That body keeps the score kind of idea. So same thing with the throat chakra, loosening this area, the shoulders, the neck, really effective to, set you up for the opportunity to heal and balance that space. And then, singing, chanting, toning, whatever you might do, can be really helpful, to create that activation for a deficient throat chakra, especially, stream of consciousness journaling. And that's where we're trying to get that cycle open. Like, I don't know if you've ever read things like Henry Miller, which is one that comes to mind, but like Tropic of Capricorn, Tropic of Cancer, where he's really just this stream of consciousness. Almost anything that comes in comes out, and you're really trying to create that free flow, that beautiful cycle, by expressing exactly what's coming as it's coming, and doing it as quickly as possible so you don't have time to bottleneck. So it really makes sense to do some of these practices. If you have an excess of this throat chakra vipassana, which is a silent retreat, might be something that helps you get back into your body and maybe rebalance that space. So yeah, we're doing well for time. Try to get through these last two in the next 15 minutes or so. So the third eye chakra, this ajna right here in the brow point, that beautiful indigo color, in that I statement, I see. I'm just going to check. Excuse me 1 second. If anybody jumped in late. Oh, we got it. Okay.
I've been letting people in, yeah.
Oh, you can. Okay, good. I just thought I'd double check just because I didn't want right on. Okay, thanks very much, Greg.
You bet.
So good. Let's me keep going where I was. So that indigo color, that I see statement, that element of light. So we're moving from sight, from sound in that throat chakra, to light in that third eye element, and that ability, to really see. The bija sound for that third eye, that basic issue of intuition space, is Om, right? The sound of the universe. And so, this is really important to understand. So with that beautiful intuition, that beautiful seeing, a lot of the third eye chakra in that space relates to pattern recognition, and and speaking and understanding symbols and things of that nature, in a bigger way, than often language limits us. And what happens, especially in our lives, and we can all resonate with this, I'm sure, is that with that pattern recognition, it's almost as though when something fits a pattern, we stop seeing, we stop taking in new information, right? When somebody behaves perhaps like, especially when we've had trauma in a particular situation, and it comes down to we're just trying to protect ourselves, and so we're trying to summarize our world to stay safe. And so something looks like something we've experienced, we almost say that's what it is, and we stop taking in new information. We stop noticing, we stop seeing. So it's really important with that third eye chakra, to keep that, concept open, to make sure that, there may be a different perception, there may be new information, there may be other things going on, and to really challenge ourselves to see beyond, what we think we understand, or what we think, we can understand around us, or that we see coming, or, that we would explain in terms of what behavior or otherwise is happening in front of us. And a lot of it, in this space relates to attachment, to outcomes. So the way that we think things should be, and when they're not, a whole bunch of, resistance or judgment or otherwise comes into that space. And so the third eye, in addition to that beautiful pattern recognition and stopping us from being overly generalistic in that space, we also become aware of when we have an attachment to a certain outcome. It's okay to have preferences out there, but ultimately we should be open and willing, and wanting to see why the outcome that occurred was the one that did, because we can't do anything to change it or otherwise. And so really working on that attachment space has a lot to do with that third eye chakra. And the demon is illusion, right? So obviously either creating an illusion, which we can often do in deficiency or excess, all these conversations we can have in our minds, all these types of things that exist in that space. It's all around illusion, this unwillingness to see, to take in, and to experience what's actually happening in front of us. So really keeping an open mind about some of these concepts and how it is that we might get in the way of that seat of intuition, that beautiful third eye space that can help us intuit so many things. And so another thing to really think about too, and this is kind of related to outcomes, is what feelings or things about us that we project onto others, right? When we're attached to a particular outcome, we're often trying to control others, the way that things are going to be or otherwise. And so it's really important to look at that. And what is it that we feel about ourselves that we'll often project onto our partners, onto our friends, onto other people in certain situations. We really want to see things as they are ultimately. So let's get into deficiencies, excess, and balance. So that seat of intuition, that third eye space, is deficient. We can be, really insensitive, poor vision, memory, lack of imagination, difficulty visualizing, denial, unwillingness to accept reality. We wanted some outcome and it didn't happen that way, and we're almost in denial that that's gone and that's over and it's never going to be that way or otherwise. And so really the types of things that exist in deficiency from time to time. And the excess, of course, fantasies, delusions, those kinds of things, overly active imagination, you can imagine where some of these things could lead, difficulty concentrating, too much input happening in that space, right? So just thinking about those things. And then when we look at balance in that third eye chakra, we're intuitive, we're perceptive, perhaps imaginative, having a good memory, those kinds of things, able to think symbolically, I mentioned earlier. So thinking of that, beautiful balance. So some affirmations, pretty obvious. about that enhancement, that belief, that power in the intuition, cultivating a clear path to what we're looking for, manifesting my dreams. These are all, powerful affirmations for that third eye space. And then healing practices, of course, relate to that beautiful visual art and stimulation, meditation. Ty's not here tonight, but it's amazing what meditation has done in his life, and I'm sure he'll share his experiences another time. Guided visualization, these things that really reduce we talk about pratyahara in yoga, where we eliminate senses, we close down the eyes, we really try to bring that introspective, awareness into our bodies. And doing that in meditation can really help create that freedom, that space to allow that creativity to flow, that visualization to flow, doing all of these types of things that can be helpful, with that third eye space. Let's get into the crown chakra, which is a little bit shorter, and then we will wrap it up. So beautiful violet color. That I statement is I understand. And so beautiful tower, right? Like I am, I feel, I do, I love, I speak, I see, I understand. Like it's a beautiful stack as we work through all of those different levels, of the chakra. And here at this crown chakra space, we're talking about thought, consciousness, that universal consciousness. And that, the basic issue with that is cognition, of course, as we really try to evaporate into that universal consciousness. The biggest thing that happens with that crown chakra that we create is that separation, right? That separation from everything else that is, and we're all connected in this beautiful, seamless web of the universe. Keeping that open, that cognition, that beautiful connection is what we're looking for. And myth of separation I've just described is a problem with the crown chakra, things we place between ourselves and that beautiful cosmic divine, things that we try to control, things that, we have attachment to outcomes, things that, we get in the way. Michael Singer does a beautiful job talking in a very pragmatic way about, forget yourself and get to know life, right? Like stop putting yourself in the way of what's happening. Stop creating things that don't exist, that they create that separation. So demon is attachment. We talked about that. And anything, this is really where substitutions we use to fill that emptiness in our soul come from. It's a deficiency often in that crown chakra space. And we're really, trying to do that at the end of the day from a place of healing and good. It's just not super effective. So let's talk about deficiencies and excesses. Spiritual cynicism or learning difficulties, rigid belief systems, apathy, I don't give a shit kind of concept. A lot of people go there. And then obviously lower chakra excesses that we talk about when, you're trying to fill that void with outside kind of things, greed, materialism, whatever. That often is connected to that deficiency in the crown chakra, which is about connectedness. And you almost kind of lose that sense of separate self in many unhealthy ways. That excess is, too much intellectualization, spiritual addiction. We all, I'm sure, have experienced someone or even ourselves going through all sorts of different things, just searching, and you can get this situation where there's that frantic kind of behavior that can exist in that space when there's an excess of that, crown chakra, confusion or separateness from the body, kind of the stuff that we're talking about. So let's just get into the few affirmations and some healing practices. So being a divine being in the human experience, which we all are, beautiful thing to remember. Affirmation I often use in yoga, really powerful, multifaceted, open to new ideas, kind of that openness, that connection, getting ourselves out of the way, right? Where we have rigid ideas, rigid belief systems, we're almost placing a big barrier between ourselves and that beautiful flow of the universe, whatever it is. So these are all kinds of things that when we hold on to them too strongly, they become these attachments that separate us from, that beautiful divine. So healing practice, of course, learning and study. This is a big one, right? This is about awareness. When we talked about how these develop at different stages in life, the crown chakra is much later in life, like well into the 20s, I believe, and it continues to grow and to learn and for the rest of our lives. And so it's really important to keep reading, keep open, that meditation, that introspection, that ability to quiet the senses and just really try to reach and connect with that beautiful space. Those things are important. Developing that inner witness, right? That backseat quarterback that's really aware of what's happening in your mind, what's happening in your body. A really responsive space where you're kind of really rooted in that witness consciousness. And that's something that we often will say that we're working towards in meditation, I believe, at least in my practice. But really developing that allows that beautiful sense of that connection with the universe. You're kind of just existing in this space where you're not really your body, you're not really your mind, you're aware of what those things are doing and you're experiencing them, but you know that you're something more, you're witnessing these things happen. And it's a really interesting place, to exist from, but it's what we're looking for in crown chakra balance. And then obviously that physical emotional connection. So really getting back into that interoceptive state, really recognizing what's happening inside your body, kind of where things are happening, so that you can establish that reconnection, see where you may not feel your body in certain places, see where there may be some other, deficiencies that need to be healed. So yeah, right on. I got through that pretty quickly. I was a little worried that we'd run out of time, but got a good half hour for discussion. Next week, we've covered a bunch of stuff. We're going to finish the chakras today. We went through that masculinity and relationship framework that GS Youngblood presented. So next week, I think we'll just have like an open kind of webinar, and it provides an opportunity for us to chat, share experience, get into that space, because I know that these meetings can be quick. And there may be, people that have questions or want to engage a little bit more deeply on some of these topics that we've covered to date. So we'll provide that opportunity, next week. So right on. I got through that quickly. We got a bunch of dudes on the call. So yeah, let's just open it up. I'd love to, any feedback you have, if something really resonated with you when we talked about particularly, excess and deficiency and balance in some of these chakras. We've all experienced that at some point or another in our lives, I'm sure. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys.
Mm-hmm. Chakra. Yeah.
Go ahead, Blake.
Cool. I had an insight there with when you were talking about the throat chakra and the gentleman you mentioned that's basically channeling ideas through and back out his mouth without any filter. I have the insight I have with that, and then I have a question after. The insight is I noticed that I'm an open channel to ideas, and then they go into a notebook, and then it just gets stacked in a notebook, like it's just like all my ideas. I have a challenge in the third dimension here, implementing the ideas. And I don't really have much more to say than that, but I just noticed, like, man, the freedom of that dude that you mentioned, that it sounded like he had ideas that just come back out as words, but my ideas are actually things to create in this world. So that stood out.
Cool, man.
For me, for sure.
And I just want to clarify, Blake, like when I talked about that open channel, what I really meant is like when we're experiencing the world, like through our five senses into that sacral chakra space. And, we have emotions, we have things that exist in our inner world. Are we expressing that with honesty, with truth, obviously compassion and kindness as well. But, do we have that clear sense of expression? Simple examples might be, we're asked to do something that we really don't want to do, right? Like, do we kindly, express that inner world? Like, or are we bottlenecking and worried about how they're going to feel about us, or whether or not we're going to have some conflict or otherwise, and therefore kind of bottlenecking and filtering what's really happening in our internal state. When it comes to like being open to ideas, that crown chakra space, I hadn't talked about that, coming in and just freely flowing out of the throat chakra. I know people do have these beautiful channeling experiences. I have not experienced that state, but I guess they could both be kind of, if you're so connected to that consciousness, like there's presumably that's where everything lives, all the knowledge, all the ideas, all of the things that we just borrow little bits and pieces in our human experience. But if you do somehow open to that beautiful kind of current, I'd be curious, what could come through. Maybe that's what people do when they when they channel. It's kind of both things happening, ideas through that crown space out the mouth, and then we're talking about a different cycle when we go sacral chakra to mouth. But anyhow, I digress, but it gave me some interesting things to think about.
Yeah, totally. The question that I have is, what is there a course, or is there like, what kind of work can we do? I know that you give ideas of like, oh, there's like a mantra, and then there's like an om for a certain chakra or whatever, or like different postures. Is there in-person workshops? Like, I feel like that's what's next for me. This is only the second call I've been on, so maybe you guys have something tied in, or maybe it is just information, but I now want to practice what we're talking about, like actually go and do the work. Yeah.
Wicked. That would be the idea, Blake. At some point, I'd love to hold like workshops where we could do some of these different activities and try to create a sense of more balance in spaces that I've identified for this time in our lives that we're a little out of balance. And I'd also recommend for you, Blake, have you done Kundalini yet?
I've been in some Kundalini like classes,
Yeah.
but I've not been like a practitioner ongoingly.
You should come. Yeah, there's Kundalini is particularly interesting. You start with a series of spinal warm-ups, a lot of which are focused on like the shoulders and the neck and the throat. You do chanting, of course, as a group, and you're always welcome to listen. None of these things are ever required. And you do a lot of breath work where you're really like blowing open, that channel with fire breath, with other types of things. And there's really, if I were to align a type of yoga to best open and balance the chakras, I would definitely say it's Kundalini. Justin, have you experienced Kundalini? I know, Greg, you have your hand up. I'll come back to you in 1 second. But I'd be curious.
I have. I've done Kundalini yoga a few times, but for me, I had a full-on Kundalini awakening experience actually when I was living in Nelson, and it was the most intense spiritual experience I've ever had. I was meditating, and then I basically had an astral projection type of experience, and I launched from my body, and I was in this like infinite consciousness, like the crown chakra I just blew right through it, and it was honestly terrifying at the time because people are like talking about you're connecting with the universe or source, and it's all this oneness and bliss, and I could understand why people would feel that, but during the experience, it was like, okay, I'm this conscious awareness, but I'm not existing in my human body anymore. And so that was the scary part. So I'm like, am I going to die? Like if I don't go back to my body? So I went back to my body, and then I went back using breath work. But this time it was the exact opposite. I went to this like infinite void space, and the message was like, you are God, you are one with all, God lies within you. And then I came back to my body, and I know it was a Kundalini experience because I had this mantra come in, Om Namah Shivaya, and I was just like chanting it for days and seeing this light glowing from people. And there's Levi, he just walked by. But yeah, no, it was a really cool experience. But Kundalini awakening is it's a full-on experience. But I actually wanted to touch on what Blake had asked about earlier with the channeling, because I've been doing it for years, and I do it all through writing and mostly through my poetry. But when you have that open channel, like you were talking about having a hard time grinding your ideas into action, and I just think what I found that helps with that is as soon as you get the idea, when you have that feeling of inspiration, just taking action, taking the first step. Like you don't have to do everything, but like if you have an idea for like a really cool new pant design, just like take the next step and like maybe do something, like something like that. That taking action piece to me always shows the universe like you're ready to implement, and I think that's where the motivation to continue comes from. So anyway, hopefully that answered your question. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, Justin's poems are kick-ass, by the way. I have like 5 of his poetry books. Right on. Go ahead, Greg. You had your hand up for a while, so I apologize for.
No worries, buddy. Great shares, guys. Love it. So when I originally raised my hand, it's because I was going to share something about chakras. But before I do that, I want to quickly touch on something that Blake said. And you were saying, hey, I want to put this into practice. I want to put rubber to road on this, which is fantastic. Good for you. And I'm wondering if you're getting I just want to make sure you're getting my emails with the Mind Valley login for the chakra course. Did that come through? Oh, you're muted, brother.
Yeah, that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So that's just an online course, right? And I can, I know you're probably a lot like me. In person's better. You'd love to do something where you can really sink your teeth into. So now I want to really quickly share what I was going to share, and that'll kind of segue into some in-person opportunities. And what Dan said about Kundalini, absolutely, like that's exactly what that is, right? Really, it's about chakra health. What I was going to share is that I did a big Soundcraft experience this week with a large group of people. Soundcraft is the. Did you change that, Dan?
Sorry, I was just changing my view to gallery.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, so Soundcraft is the multidimensional sound that we have. We're able to create these very unique soundtracks, and there's a lot of science behind them. They bring the nervous system into a grounded state of openness. We call it a therapeutic psychedelic state. And this is important because we as human beings are the only animals who hold on to trauma and hold on to things from the past. And this is relevant to the chakra system because our system is quite unique as animals on this planet as well. And so we take on trauma, we get blocked emotions, blocked energies, and then we tend to say things like, I can't have a breakdown right now, or I can't have a meltdown, or I'll deal with that later, or that's too big for me. And we kind of push things down and hold things down. And the nervous system's always trying to heal. It's always trying to let things go. But we as human beings are the only animals that will hold on to things. And often it's because this unconscious mind thinks, if I forget about this, I'll never be safe, right? Or if I forgive them, then I'll never be safe. And so we get used to holding on to densities, blockages, and we get used to moving our energy around it. And we are progressively choking off this flow of love and truth through our system into the world. And so Soundcraft is powerful because it grounds us, which takes the lid off the jar. And now as we move through the different emotionalities with music and in multidimension, any emotionality that the music comes into that's in resonance with something you're holding, that something wakes up. And now it can be released. The lid is off the jar. And the beautiful thing about Soundcraft is that you don't need to know where that thing came from, what it means, how long ago. You don't need to be able to articulate or talk about it. You just need to surrender into the music, and you have, waves of release. And so that's one thing that I wanted to share, because we just did a big one this weekend, and people were reporting colors. And this happens both in our Soundcraft and in our therapeutic psychedelic work, where we use that Soundcraft music, where people are reporting a lot of red or orange, maybe, often starting lower. And sometimes myself or one of our therapists will be called to go and just put hands on feet, or it's almost like we're opening a valve. And then we'll feel like a big grounding, like a big whoo. Gaia just takes back things and completely purifies them, recycles them back into the whole. And then that person's seeing yellow. Yeah. And they might build, and now another big whoosh, and now they're seeing green, and so on. Sometimes it happens within a single session. Sometimes it happens over a weekend, a retreat weekend. So both the Soundcraft that we do and the therapeutic psychedelic work that we do, for many people, not everybody, but for many people, it very much seems like the chakras are involved, and the traumas, the scenes that they're being taken to, the things that they're being confronted with, that the therapies allow them to bravely encounter and surrender through, are seemingly very much associated with these energy centers. And the consequent freedom in behavior, belief, perception also seems to correspond with those energy centers. Yeah. Does that all make sense? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I know Kurt and I have had our experiences.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
I thought, Greg, maybe you were gonna mention that talking to your dead course for Blake, or does he already know about that?
I don't think so. It's on my mind. Yeah, it was on my mind to mention, but I didn't want to just keep hammering too hard. I wanted to
Just-
pass the mic up.
Well, just sign up over here and
Yeah. So we have one of the therapists on our team. She's a really, really skilled medium and psychic. And over the last couple of years, she's been getting these downloads that, well, do you guys want to hear about this? Should I crack into this really quickly and just take 4 minutes? Do you mind, Dan? Yeah?
No, not at all.
So she's been getting these downloads from, from source that our deceased loved ones have the ability to and almost the responsibility to support us through healing of trauma, healing of energetic blockages, especially things that they might have had a role in. And so we've been tinkering with this, and she's able to open a channel between a client and deceased loved ones. She's able to see what has happened or what happened in the past, and sometimes it's lives ago. And she's able to hold that channel so that deceased loved ones can create energetic shifts. And it appears that like karmic loads, karmic knots, just like, like things just click into place. And that lesson has been learned. Your soul has completed that contract, and now you're free in that place that was holding you before, free from that constriction. And so for over the last 6 months, we've been building a course, and we thought, we'll just build a course about connecting people with this. We called it Healing with Your Dead. And then we realized, you know what, before you can really embrace this, you need to, it's a pretty punchy title, eh? And then we realized, before people can really embrace this, we need to have a healed sacred feminine. And of course, this applies to men as well. We need to have that safe nest inside where we can really surrender to receive this multidimensional love, where we can receive deep and true healing instantly. We need a grounded, open nest inside of us, a freedom there. And so we created a prerequisite course called Healing Your Sacred Feminine. And then we realized, hey, it's really important for people to be given an opportunity to surrender into, discover, and enhance their own spiritual gifts. We all have them. We all have the ability to intuit, to hear. Some people are more clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. But we ended up building a third course, which is the prerequisite of the second course, that guides people on a 10-week journey into your gifts, into clarity on and expansion of your spiritual gifts. And so you don't have to do all three, but they are progressive. So if you want to do that third one, you have to do the first two. And the idea is that by the end, it's a 32-week journey with a couple of gaps, which pushes it to like 36 weeks, gaps in between the courses. So it's a long-term thing, and we're really moving the needle forward every week, allowing you to grow into your gifts, grow into perception, allow you to connect with source for wisdom, for clarity, for guidance on purpose. And then Healing Sacred Feminine, there's a lot of deep healing that we're doing there, using many of the LifeCraft tools and many things that Jane has. And then the third course is now we're going to get to leverage those tools in connecting with people who, I say people, but really souls, beings, who have the ability and desire to help you climb the staircase of vibration, right? Yeah, so that's another thing, like the chakras are going to be very much involved there. Yeah, thanks, Kurt. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah. That last course, Greg, is that what you call Purpose Craft?
No, Purpose Craft is 12 weeks itself. Minimum
Okay.
12 weeks. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Oh, super cool. I was going to mention, we talked about Kundalini and these awakenings or whatever that sometimes people will allude to. The whole idea of Kundalini is that we've got this like dormant energy at the base of our spine, kind of at the root kind of section of the spinal column. And as we move in certain ways and obviously bring in breath work and chanting and mantra. And so it's all about movement and rhythm and sound and breath, all in this beautiful kind of rhythm. We can awaken that energy and start to move it up through that chakra channels, like the central column of the spine, and ultimately into the cerebral and back down, and it continues to flow freely. And so you've awakened kind of that dormant energy that is existing there. And so in those practices where people experience euphoric or other types of emotion and feeling, it's usually the result of having really opened that channel. And we used like the bandhas, that mula bandha, where you pull up your pelvic floor, and that throat lock bandha, the jalar bandha it's called, to kind of lock that energy in that space. And when you do some of these exercises and then you really hold that container, it's pretty powerful what you can feel sometimes. And it's call it a wire brush for the chakra channels or something. I don't know. It reminds me of this old Saturday Night Live spoof where it was called a lung brush, and these people were all smoking to death, and they would just like throw some toilet scrubber down their throat and pull out like big strands of tar and stuff. It's like Kundalini's that lung brush for your chakras. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Anybody remember the lung brush from Saturday Night Live?
Yeah, man, I remember that.
Yeah.
I think about that every now and then.
Yeah, we're going way back, like 30 years probably. Too funny. Yeah. Well, anything else, guys? What caught your interest? I'm curious, or anything that was like, oh, weird. That makes a lot of sense to me. In some of these elements, I'd be curious what kind of what else maybe resonated with you guys.
I thought it was interesting, just like all these spiritual things. It seems like you can look into. They kind of just explain things from their own perspective in the similar way, whether it's chakras or whatever it might be. But I notice a lot with myself lately. I just have this intuition of me being on this path and having these huge pendulum swings, especially in the beginning of what, you would describe with chakras as like excess or deficiencies. And they may last longer and there are bigger swings. And then lately they've been honing in, and they haven't been so extreme one way or the other, but they're moving a lot faster, which is sort of unusual for me. Like I've been having like ups and downs of like maybe extreme excess of one thing and then deficiency like almost in the same day. I'll have like a high and then I'll have like a low, and then it's kind of all over the map. And I'm just kind of, I'm trying to like just let go of some of it, because I do sometimes get like spiritually obsessed with trying to find something or dig in there. And like, I know I still have something that's kind of blocking me from moving forward, but focusing on it too hard is not seeming to be a great way to go about it. So I know I'm trying to focus on just the here and now. Of course, that's extremely hard to do. But letting go of the fact that I'm getting so attached to wanting to fix, and just let it kind of balance out on its own. I hope,
Right.
It's better than stressing over it. But the chakra thing kind of provided a bit of explanation again from another point of view for that.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. Go ahead, Greg. I had some things to say about that afterwards.
You go ahead, Dan. You go first.
I'm curious, Kurt, like when you describe some of those ups and downs, like do those resonate with probably the upper chakras mostly, and not necessarily the lower chakras?
I mean, I'd have to review those lists again real quick, but I think it could include all of them. But it seems like it's been more of the upper, like the crown chakra and stuff you're talking about.
I would expect it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. But I mean, there are, of course, days where I just feel completely ungrounded, and then I have to come in and ground again. But maybe that's an easier problem to solve than, some spiritual obsession or whatever it might be.
Yeah, maybe. The one thing I wanted to share with you, Kurt, in my research and readings over the years is I often view the chakra system like a ladder, right? So we would probably start with the root, make sure we're feeling, safe, support, strong foundation, and we can move into the other areas. And what often happens when people have significant imbalances in their like lower chakras, which are the chakras where we really identify with self, because we do have like, tangible self that we need to understand. We need to feel safe and supported. We need to know what our desires and like creativity and fluidity are. Like, where does that exist? Where does that come from for us? And that real like power, that fire, that I do. Like, how is it that you want to, share your gifts with the world, and then moving through that heart with love and to the upper chakras. And when that's like balanced a lot down here, we can get thrown around a lot up here if we're existing in that space too much. And so I would often recommend people that experience what you've described, as far as I understand it, is to really come back and get that solid foundation, and then allow ourselves, to exist in perhaps that space a little bit more often. Otherwise, it can be a bumpy ride.
Yeah, like just some more grounding. I have been doing a lot of things just physically on purpose to try and ground myself again too. Like, I'll go to the gym, or I'll eat a certain way, or do something, take all these breaks or whatever I'm doing just for my mental health. I'm not like doing it to try and get in shape or this or that, but just trying to level out and get my mind off things too. But
yeah, a lot of that instability, I think, also comes from when we do have some of these imbalances lower down and deficiencies, we don't feel like complete. We don't feel solid, and there's some imbalance there. And therefore, we look to spirituality, other things outside of us in a frantic way to try to fill that unwholeness, to try to, reestablish that sense of, strength and purpose and being. And we need to remember, we're not going to get that out there ever, right? And that's where coming back to those, lower 3 chakras especially can be really effective. Maybe set a stronger foundation and then try, exploring some stuff anew, essentially.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think all you can do is keep in mind that, like you said, remind yourself that you're not looking for those things elsewhere, having these attachments and whatever, because it is so easy to understand what that means and remind yourself to do it. But I mean, if I was truly living that way, then I wouldn't need to be doing any of this stuff. I'd be doing it,
Therein lies the work that we'll be doing forever.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Greg, if you recall?
Yeah. I wonder if I can get 2 birds stoned at once here. Blake, did I hear you say something like you have cool stuff coming through, like ideas and inspiration, but it's sometimes feels hard to do it. Is that right? Yeah. So let's see if we can stone 2 birds here at once, guys. And Kurt, what I'm hearing you say is that, sometimes you're feeling like the pendulum can swing, you're feeling really good and then really bad, and sometimes it swings fast, right? And you're like crossing the chasm at warp speed. And anytime we're having a conscious experience that we don't want to be having, anytime we feel like we're on a roller coaster, like we're on a horse that we don't have reins, and it's riding us somewhere, and we're like, fuck, I don't want to go here. Or I was just here and I just left and I was trying to leave, Or anytime we're not able to do something that we want to do, it is, and this sounds like an overgeneralization, but I don't believe it is because our unconscious mind does not believe that the thing we consciously want is safety for us. So it could be the case, Kurt, in your instance, where the unconscious mind, whose only job is to keep you safe, the unconscious mind, which creates your conscious experience of everything, your self-identity and the way you interface with the world, if it believes these things that we need to be successful, safe, in fill in the blank thing you want, they are not happening for me right now. Yeah. Then all of a sudden our mood is hijacked. We feel very angry. And the Kurt I know is an action taker, right? You want to take a step back. What's the fucking problem here? Make an action plan, 5 steps, and then just hammer those 5 steps, right? And so then we might get moving in the right direction again. And what I believe could be happening here is that your soul is whipping you across the chasm from feeling really good to feeling really bad as an invitation to really take a step back and ask, what is my unconscious mind assigning meaning to? What does it want that I'm getting when I feel good? And what does it want that I'm not getting when I feel bad? And the work, as Dan said, the work that we're going to be doing forever is really trying to make adjustments here. Because once we're having a conscious experience of this sucks, it's really hard to pull the this sucks train back to the station. It's leaving the station, right? And we can try to be cool, and we can try to focus and try to breathe through it, but we're still going to have that emotional cascade, and we're still going to have that response. And so the work is done here, and so it's not your fault, right? That roller coaster is in no way a sign that you're fucking it up, that if you could just try a little harder, you're not enough, that none of that is true. You're simply having an unconscious experience of a deep unconscious process that's trying to love you, and it just believes that the wrong things are important for you, right? Because you already have everything you need, and that's the surrender you were talking about. And then the irony is, when we can come to that place, we now have an incredible clarity and peace and calm. And same for you, Blake. You know, we see in the clinic all the time, and again, it's not your fault at all. There could be, and I've had many of these, an unconscious belief like you don't deserve that, or if you get it, it's going to fall apart, or if you get it, people are going to start noticing you, and that's no good, or whatever. There could be any number of myriad things where your beautiful soul is receiving channel, truth, ways for you to express purpose, but when you go to put that rubber to the road, the unconscious mind is saying, no, not safe for you, not available to you, you've made mistakes, you have to pay, you don't deserve it, whatever it is. And no human being has ever defeated their unconscious mind, right? Not in the long run. We can push against it in the short term, right? We can go to the gym for January and maybe first week of February, but then if the unconscious mind thinks this change is not safe for you or you don't deserve it, it just slowly rubs. It will not ever stop doing what it thinks is keeping you safe, even though that's not true, because the belief it's holding, that it's driving, was formed through a misinterpretation of a trauma or something that happened in the past, right? Yeah. So the thesis is it's not your fault, but you have all the power in the right work and the right tools. Does that make sense?
And I
Totally.
think, why don't you share, Greg?
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I was just going to ask Greg to share his Mind Valley creds, because there is some amazing stuff on this space that could really give you kind of some of that awareness that you might otherwise use a little bit obscure. If you're okay doing that, Greg. In the meantime, what were you going to say, Blake?
Appreciate the interaction so much. Like, it's cool to have conversations like this about real life instead of just like, hey man, what's happening? How are things? Good. You good? Yeah. Fuck this. Fucking weather. Like, we're actually talking about ourselves, our experience of life, our frustrations, like what we want to overcome. This is real for me. I appreciate this.
Yeah.
And so in this like digging that we're doing, because I exposed myself and others have put things like vulnerable things out there, right? And then we're hearing feedback from you, Greg, and you, Dan. When I'm like bringing things in, not even consciously, I'm just open to them. And then I'm like, oh, that's fucking pretty rad. Write it down. It's like build a house stuff that I'm writing down. It's not like go talk to Becky about going on a date. It's like a fucking year-long project that takes every day of my life, you know? And then 15 minutes later, another fucking idea. And it's like, that's a 3-year project, right? And so what I just heard you saying, Greg, that I'm now getting is even that's not impossible, because the voice in my head's like, oh, well, he doesn't fucking get what level of ideas these are. But then the real me came back in and was like, there's a guy out there who does build a house one day and then build a car manufacturing company the next day and then launch rockets the next day. And fucking Elon Musk doesn't really have excuses. He just gets shit done. So it's almost like what I'm hearing is elevating my leadership, that I don't have to be the guy with the hammer and the nail building the house. I just get to be a leader that causes these ideas in the world. So the work is to elevate my leadership.
That's cool.
Yeah, I love it. And you know, as you bravely continue on the journey you're on, Blake, we're all coming into more and more clarity, right? That um, the more we understand our gifts, yeah, the more. Maybe a good way to say it is the less we feel scattered, because I've been there, brother. And first of all, you're right twice, because you're right that I wasn't seeing the magnitude of these cool ideas you're having, and then you're also right that like that that's still a self limitation, one that most of us are probably put on ourselves. Well, I can't do this and that, right? But I found that those tangible speed limits, they somehow just dissolve. We don't know where they go as we continue to surrender. Like the universe just kind of, everything just kind of clicks into, and now we're doing something so in flow, and it feels so right and so meaningful. And yeah, I believe that's absolutely available to you.
Right on. Well, we are awesome chat. These smaller groups are nice to give everybody a chance to really engage. So it's pretty rad. Maybe that tells me something as well as we kind of continue this little journey of self-exploration and whatever you want to call it, authenticity and just being awesome men at the end of the day. But yeah, right on, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you. Justin, Blake, Kurt, Greg. I think Joel was on the call as well. I don't see him now, but he might just be listening. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to be here. Next week, we're really just going to have an open fireside chat, kind of review some of the stuff that we did, maybe get into some more kind of tangible ideas and exercises for things that we can incorporate in our lives. Maybe sharing things that you do. And if you guys are interested in that deeper chakra work on Mind Valley, just email Greg and he can hook you up with that. Just Greg at lifecraft.me. And I'm Dan at lifecraft.me. And message anytime. And Blake, I see you. Kurt, I see you. Justin, I see you all the time. Not all the time, but I see you enough. Like we can pick these things up anytime. So awesome, guys. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your energy. And the next week, as I said, fireside chat. The week after that, we're going to dive into Eros, which will be interesting. We'll talk to you in a bit.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you.
Thanks.
Yeah, you too, guys. See you later.
Oh, you're still there? Can you hear me?